Welcome to WorkSpan TV. I'm Ryan Johnson from World at Work. I'm in the studio today with Ken Cardinal of Pearl Meyer, and he's going to offer some tips on how to conduct your own compensation survey. Ken, let's get right into it. If someone's going to design their own compensation survey and they're thinking about who to invite to participate, what are some of the things they should be thinking about?
The first thing to think about is who are the thought leaders or influencers that will make a difference to the survey audience. So one of the challenges you're going to face when you get your survey results is you're going to go out to line management, presumably, and say, here's what the survey says. And their first comment is going to be, well, who's in the survey? When you then show them the participant list, what you want them to do is recognize, oh, these are people that I view as competitors to add credibility to the survey. So let's take, for example, the thought of focusing on an industry. Recently, I went and looked at the pharmaceutical industry. We don't actually do a pharmaceutical survey in Pearl Meyer Partners. But I looked at the pharmaceutical industry, and if you look at the revenues of the top 50 pharmaceutical companies, there's one company right now that accounts for almost 10% of the revenue, and that's Pfizer. So imagine you're doing a survey, and your survey doesn't have Pfizer. You're missing the largest firm in the pharmaceutical industry. If you look at the top 10 of the top 50, they're 80% of the revenue in the pharmaceutical industry. If you don't have a reasonable representation, you probably won't get all, but if you don't have a reasonable representation, is that going to carry credibility to the audience when they say, well, gee, none of the big players are in the survey? That's just looking at industry. Now, another area you could look at in many jobs is geography. So let's suppose you decided to do a geographic survey and you looked at private higher education in New England. But you didn't include Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, BU, or BC, which are the 5 biggest. It's going to be hard for the faculty member or the administration of a higher education institution to really value that information when they don't see that the biggest players are in the survey. The third area that you can focus on, so there's industry, there's geography, and there's also labor market. And so take, for example, something like investment banking. I want to know how much investment bankers make, and by the way, it's probably a lot, right? Because we hear about that in the news. And so I want to then probably look at investment banks. And it's hard to argue that looking at investment banks for investment bankers doesn't make sense. And so I'll probably have, if I get the right big investment banks in there, I probably have a good survey. But let's suppose at the same time I take that survey and I then say, well, could these investment banks also give me their information on their accountants and their HR folk and their admins and whatever? And so then I take the accountant data off to the manager of accounting and I say, well, here's what accountants make. And that manager, rightfully, logically says, well, who's in the survey? And you say, well, it's all these investment banks. And that manager says, well, but what about the big accounting firms? And you say, well, they're not in the survey. And all of a sudden that manager says, well, that survey may be fine for investment banks, but my labor market's different. I hire from accounting firms. And all of a sudden you've got a survey that has credibility in one space but not in another because of the labor market. If you pay attention to industry, you pay attention to geography or labor market, whichever is appropriate, that's how you go about picking participants.
If someone's going to do a survey, what are some tips for increasing the longevity of that survey?
Longevity usually refers to a recurring survey. So you want a survey going on and on and on. And right now we run some surveys that have been around, believe it or not, for more than 50 years. The same survey has been running. I have not been running it the 50 years, just so you know. But in those surveys, what's vital is that they evolve. For example, we run one survey called the Research and Development Survey. That survey, if you look at the report today and compare it to the report from 50 years ago, and we do have one in one of the early reports, they're nothing. They don't look anything alike anymore because they have evolved to meet participant needs. And that's critical to a recurring survey. Now, one of the challenges with evolution of a survey is can you get the participants to actually give you back information on what they need? What we're talking really about is not getting the full attention of a participant using electronic media. And so the end result is that if you think about survey evolution, is how do you get that full attention for just a short period of time to say, what is it you need? And usually that's going to be a telephone, it's going to be an interested participant, somebody who's deriving value and sees that they will derive more value with something, that maybe they've experienced something in another survey and they say, that'd be really great here or something like that. Or or it's you get on the telephone and you actually have them pinned down, so to speak. But getting just that short, brief focus on the part of participants is how a survey evolves.
Ken, thanks for coming in today to offer some great tips on how to conduct your own compensation and benefit survey. Of course, Ken's a longtime World at Work faculty member and contributor to World at Work, and so it's great to see you, Ken. For World at Work and WorkSpan TV, I'm Ryan Johnson.